We fucked up.
People can't afford to live, people can't afford gas, people can't afford food, people can't afford rent. The cost of living has gone up within these past 4 years, and I think that everyone here has been a victim of that.
Well, all of us farmers have officially fucked around, and we have officially found the fuck out now, guys. I am on the verge of bankruptcy. I'm on the verge of fucking tears. Overnight, all of my fucking help fled. My help, out of fear for their safety, their lives, they fucking fled. And now I am left out here standing in my unharvested carrot field. It is January and I'm in Kansas, and this is when carrot harvest goes in fucking Kansas. This field should be full of workers, but all my fucking workers left. And who the fuck do you think is to blame for that? Every single one of them left. Now I have to by myself try to fill that truck with a load of fucking carrots in one day, and I can't do that, guys. I have to get these fucking carrots to market by next week, or my contract is fucking terminated. This is $936,000 worth of carrots right here, and I can't fucking pick them by myself. If they are unharvested, I will get kicked out of that contract, and I will get sued by the fucking Planters Loves Carrots company for that fucking money. But I have nobody that'll come fucking pick my carrots.
It's time to speak up. Well, it appears the joke's on me. It appears I have been the biggest fool alive. You see, before the last couple of days, I knew that there was a segment of MAGA who just hated, who just wanted to burn the world down, and they don't care who they hurt. In the meantime, I knew there was that section, but I really, really thought that most of MAGA just didn't get it. I really thought they just didn't understand. They didn't understand economics because it's complicated. They hadn't studied Project 2025, so they didn't know what was coming. But I really thought when he got in there and started doing the things that hurt so many people, that they would realize, and that they would. But they don't care. Y'all have been telling me this for 2 months, and I kept saying, no, we just have to explain it to them. We just have. Now, I know there are a few, and I thank you guys. You make it worth sticking with this. But over the last couple of days, I have realized that the majority of Republicans do not care how many people are hurt.
A quick message to my white friends: you are not safe from this fascism either.
This is not just a foreign issue, it's our tax dollars that are also being used to commit these war crimes. It is also the duty of us, the people, to stand against the Trump regime, the Trump administration, that are committing crimes both here in the US and against people in Venezuela.
Now, in the background of this interview, you could see that police car. And now right here, we're showing you video we have. Immediately after the interview finished, Plickta was arrested by 2 Grand Rapids police officers. You can see it in the video. And an officer tells Plickta that she is being arrested for obstructing a roadway and failure to obey a lawful command from a police officer. You can see as she's taken away in that car, she was issuing a number of messages about wanting the U.S. to free Maduro. But again, she was taken away by police officers there. And you can see in this video, officers were closely following this procession in downtown Grand Rapids.
This young woman was standing in solidarity for due process and constitutional rights, and she was arbitrarily arrested. She was doing nothing wrong. She was exercising her First Amendment right to peacefully protest the government, and she was arrested. If you thought they were only going after black and brown people, or immigrants, or Latinos, or people who look like me, you're mistaken. Fascism doesn't just stop with one community. It expands and consumes anyone who dares even question their existence. Do not continue to wait to speak up. Stand in solidarity with your black and brown sisters and brothers and work to end this fascism. The only way through is together, or we all fall under tyranny.
I think like the biggest thing that blows me about this, it can happen to us narrative that's going on with ICE and shooting fucking white people, is like, it could always happen to you. And this is where I think people don't understand that like your class has a lot to do with how you experience America and the United States. Like your job as a white person will always be to police minorities. And that is in upper class, that is in middle class, that is in lower middle class, that is in the working class. That will always be your job, to police people. So you go into the working class, White people are so racist as fuck because their job is to police people. That's how they're socialized. But you being white does not stop you from the oppression in the United States. I don't know why you thought that. Like, being white is a privilege, yes, because you have a job. You have a job to do. Your job is to protect the upper class. That's your job. Racism and the concept of race is a social construction, but it has real life consequences because it is used to police, right? You see a higher percentage of Black and brown people, not a higher percentage, a higher rate of Black and brown people incarcerated in the United States and being detained by ICE, but that doesn't mean it's not happening to white people. It is happening to white people. It happens less because your job is to help police. But when you stop policing, gun to your head, mama.
You see, what is happening right now is interesting in America. More and more white Americans are coming out saying, this is not the America they expected, or this is not America. And they are frustrated, they are shocked, businesses are struggling, jobs are disappearing. Some are even now forced to face, aggressive enforcement policies like ICE that they once supported when they saw it, on other people. And you see, suddenly a phrase that Black people have been repeating for many years is now making sense to many people. That racism is expensive, not just morally, but also politically, economically, and even nationally. And it seems now that the consequences are coming full circle. Everybody is now taking the hit. But the most affected people, as you can see, the most people that are crying the loudest are those that were once, looked like they were a bit privileged to be protected from all of these consequences that we are seeing right now.
Now, I'm not trying to cause a stir, but Donald Trump is talking about deporting white people. I'm not talking about Prince Harry or Elon Musk or Melanie Trump. I'm talking about people that have come from Canada that have been staying here longer than what they were supposed to. Or people from Ukraine, or people from Europe or France, or some of those countries like that. It's not just Mexicans and it's not just Venezuelans. He's literally talking about deporting white people. So you better keep your birth certificate with you. My mother-in-law, she literally come from France like 80 years ago. She's going to have to keep her papers on her. If you know anybody that has come from one of these other countries, tell them they need to get their paperwork in order and make sure they're carrying it with them.
So how are we, the people that voted for Donald Trump, supposed to continue to support him when his name has been mentioned 5,000 times in these files that have been dropped?
We're going to play this video in full. But first, we have to fact check her in real time. Check this out. It wasn't 5,000 times that his name was mentioned. It was 38,000 times across the files, including mentions of Trump, Melania Trump, Mar-a-Lago, and related terms. It's mind-blowing. Did you really have to see the files to know? All the pictures with him and Jeff. All the pictures with him, Jeff, Ghislaine Maxwell, Melania. All those pictures with them together. The videos with them together. That wasn't enough. I guess I'm going to have to do it. I told you so. We told you so. Before I show my audience your video, I want you to know something. You were used. Not only by him, by MAGA. You were used. Let me show you how I know. This is how I know. They never cared about the children. This is what they cared about. And I'm going to read this to you. From App Patriot Girl. I don't know about you, but I voted for retribution and revenge. I voted for Trump to crush the left so badly that they are afraid to show their faces in the light of day. I voted for swift, vicious justice and no mercy. It's a good thing that I'm not God, because hell would be a lot more crowded right now. It was never about the children. No, not about the children. We knew that. We knew that. It was always about revenge. Swift, vicious revenge. They don't care what they do as long as they own the libs. It's a sickness. And you were used by them. Your intentions were pure. Your intentions was to save the children. All the stuff they put in your head about the Dems and what they did to the children, or what they said they did, was bullshit. It's always been on the other side, on the side that you voted for. Now, knowing this, let's watch your video.
So how are we, the people that voted for Donald Trump, supposed to continue to support him when his name has been mentioned 5,000 times in these files that have been dropped? Honestly, I'm a little bit shocked at how people from my party, I'm a conservative, I have conservative values, voted for Trump, etc. How are we making excuses for Trump? I'm truly baffled because he wasn't convicted. I mean, how do you get your name mentioned that many times? I think it's time that we hold these people accountable that are doing these disgusting things to children. Irregardless of who you voted for, what you support, we can call something bad that is bad and still be conservative, you know? Just because we criticize a particular person or people, that does not mean that we're like some leftist liberal. You know, they're calling the Epstein files a Democratic hoax. How is this a hoax?
Now, I know my smart followers and smart subscribers, their ears squealed when you said irregardless. It's just regardless. You could fix it. You could fix it by voting blue in November, in the midterms. You could fix your vote.
After all this talk about Somalians and millions of our taxpayer dollars being wasted, I truly think Americans are fed up at this point. To the point now where they're talking about literally going on a tax strike. Listen, I'm all for it. Because look around you, everything is fraud. Trump's met with Netanyahu already for the 5th time, while we keep sending billions to Ukraine and Israel, and my generation can't buy a house. Like ever. And these boomers will laugh in your face and say, work harder. The GOP would rather raise the retirement age to 70 than just enforce immigration law. And before anyone says anything, I voted for Trump. I supported him. It's about to be the end of 2025, and here's what people are noticing. No high-profile arrests, no mass deportations, Epstein files redacted, crime and inflation is out of control. Americans are told by the president that we don't have talent while H-1B visas are replacing us, funding wars we didn't vote for, and we get mocked by a country the size of New Jersey in the Middle East daily. We've had Trump for 1 full year in office. So yeah, people are talking about tax strikes, because taxes are a scam. If you don't pay, they take everything from you, your assets, your freedom, your life. But if you steal millions, if you traffic people, if you commit fraud, nothing happens. Americans are tired of being law-abiding for a country that doesn't enforce its own laws. It doesn't even matter who's in office anymore. Both sides are owned, both sides are playing us, and they're still counting on us to not do anything about it. That's why they're sloppy now, that's why they don't care, and we keep paying taxes to PDFs.
I realize most women who voted for Donald Trump don't think we're going to get a national abortion ban. They don't understand that tariffs are put on U.S. citizens, not on China, and that will mean skyrocketing prices for us at home. They don't understand that their taxes are going to go up because they make under $3 million a year. They don't understand that Project 2025 wants to do away with no-fault divorce, contraceptives. It wants to make those smutty romance novels you read a crime to possess. I know most of you thought uncritically that when you voted for Trump, you were going to have more financial security and prosperity, that you were going to see the greatness of America restored. But what you thought you were voting for is not what you're going to get. And the reality of who you put in control of our nation is going to become startlingly apparent to you over the next several months. And I hope you get every single thing that you actually voted for. I hope you experience all of it.
Trump won the 2024 election driven largely by Americans' view on the economy. I'm an economist and I specialize in federal policy. What do I make of all this? I have, I think, three things to say immediately. One, the problem that Trump tapped into, the anger he was able to capitalize in being ushered back into the presidency, it is a problem that is so much bigger than inflation for 2 years. It is a 5-decade stagnation and decline in American living standards. It's not just 12 months of inflation or 18 months of inflation. It is a structural failing of our economy, and he tapped into it and made it very palpable for Americans, as did inflation. The second thing is that however deep or big that problem is, he is probably not going to solve it or even address it at all. I mean, he's good at tapping into anger, but he doesn't have economic policy solutions for what is driving the problems that most Americans are facing. So that means, my third thing, that the future is whoever can build the solution, right? Democrats lost the election, but they can still win the problem if they can come up with a set of solutions that will actually address it. Americans have told us how angry they are about certain aspects of the economy. Trump isn't going to fix it. The policies that he's articulated don't even come close to addressing it, which means we have to identify the solutions to build a better economy. We have to make people feel empowered that they can fix their economy. One of the most striking exit poll numbers that I saw on this NBC review was just how high a share of Americans think that the best days of America are behind us. I have a very small platform, which is like me and my hostage-like situation closet, and I have a column for Bloomberg, but to the extent I have that platform, I will use it to make Americans feel like the best is yet to come, because there are so many economic policy solutions that we simply have not pursued. We won't pursue them over the next 4 years, but we can do it in the future, and I want to use my space to talk about it. So first, what is the decline in American living standards, this economic problem that Trump tapped into? So the short version is American wage growth for the bottom 50% of Americans has not been high enough to maintain the same standard of living that they had before for certain key goods. So from 1973 to 2023, this is a 5-decade period, over a lot of presidencies, a lot of Democrat and Republican swings in power, the net wage growth, real wage growth, right? This is wage growth net of inflation. The real wage growth of the bottom 50% was $3, meaning if they made $10.50 in 1973, workers at a similar place in the distribution made $13.50 in 2023. It's a $3 increase in wages over prices. That's next to nothing. That means that for the bottom half of Americans, their wage has barely kept up with inflation for almost 5 decades. Now, in terms of living standards, right? Living standards aren't a monolith. If your wage keeps up with inflation, you can afford things whose price is slower than inflation overall. And we have a lot of goods in the US whose price grows slower than inflation overall. Appliances, electronics, TVs, smartphones, computers, clothing, household furniture, a lot of recreational consumption, like books and music and movies, those have all grown much slower than prices overall. And so that's a living standard that has improved for a lot of Americans. Even cars have grown a lot slower than prices overall, kind of up into this last spike of inflation. So people can have more cars, they can have smartphones and TVs and tablets and household furniture and appliances, and they can afford all of that more. That living standard has increased. What they can't afford are the goods whose prices rise faster than inflation. And these are the big ones: housing, healthcare, childcare, college tuition. All of these rise much faster than prices overall, which means that even as Americans are maybe able to afford more consumer goods on average, they're not able to afford these kind of hallmark American goods like a house. Well, this is a 5-decade problem, and it has a lot of variation within these 5 decades. Some years, some eras are better than others. Well, during the inflation spike of 2021, it basically pushed kind of this 5-decade simmering problem to the edge. Food, which had been, basically price for food has grown with the price of inflation overall for most of the period I'm talking about. It jumps above inflation. And all of a sudden you have American households who maybe had grown accustomed to the fact that they couldn't afford housing, or they couldn't afford healthcare, or they can't afford childcare, and suddenly they can't afford food. It was such an acute realization, such a breaking point moment for a problem that has been going on for so long. It was basically like an economic bill that came due during Biden's administration. I mean, for the record, I think Biden did a pretty remarkable job considering we didn't fall into a recession. But I also know that that's really cold comfort to tell people, like, oh, you can't afford your life anymore, but hey, at least we're not in recession. Like, you can't tell people to feel better that it's not worse when they already feel bad enough. So that is a very real economic problem, and voters told us in 2024, that it is salient for them, and that however long it's been cooking, it's salient now. Well, that is a pretty intense economic problem, and 5 decades of stagnating wage growth and a price kind of not out of control, but prices increasing for goods like housing, healthcare, childcare, college tuition. Those aren't like necessarily quick fixes. But I think my second take would be, however deep this problem goes, however upset Americans are about it, I don't think Trump's going to do much about it, because he hasn't articulated any policy that gets to the root of the problem, either how much those things cost or how much Americans earn. The deportation policy and the tariff policy, I don't even really give those the dignity of being an economic policy. He has found that Americans enjoy blaming people. It's a pretty natural instinct. He's able to capitalize on it well. And like right now, everything is China and immigrants' fault. And so we've designed policy to be, deliver retribution to them. They have economic consequences, but they're not economic policy. And I think he'll make a show of pursuing them. It'll cause some problems, and he'll be like, well, they won't let me do it anymore. Something like that. Rile up his base, but not actually pursue them. The one policy that he is guaranteed to pursue is a tax cut, because he cut taxes in 2017. Most of the tax cut is going to expire on the household side. And so now he wants to renew the tax cuts that he passed. This will not help Americans. And if you think that that's a crazy statement, let me remind you, we have cut taxes on trillions of dollars of levels in 2001, 2003, 2012, and 2017. Is the 2025 tax cut going to solve all the problems that those prior 4 did not? I mean, we have spent over $8 trillion on reducing taxes for Americans. And you know what? They can't afford housing. They can't afford childcare. They can't afford food. We can blame these things on the inflation that took place under Biden, but these tax cuts did nothing to help the living standards of Americans, because you cannot change the trajectory of living standards. You cannot radically improve Americans' living standards through a tax cut. You have to build policy around addressing problems, and tax cuts simply don't do it. But we're probably going to spend another $4 trillion on them, because that's how much his tax cut is supposed to cost. That's what the estimates are right now, which means we'll have invested $12 trillion over a 25-year period into a proven non-solution for the economic problems that Americans have said very clearly is what is important to them right now. Politicians and politics will change Americans' view on the economy. If you're a Democrat, you're happier when a Democrat's in office. When you're a Republican, you're happier when a Republican's in office. But this problem will not go away, even if Americans are less angry about it once he's in there. Tax cuts aren't going to do it. They're going to cost a lot of money, and they're going to fail to solve the problem, as they have failed to solve the problem on 4 prior occasions. And we are going to arrive at the same place. I mean, it's just a different version of the same place in 4 years. The last thing I want to say, while I have the time to say it, is that we have great policy solutions that America has not put in place that can help Americans. It requires paying for them. It requires an investing in them. But I think more than anything, it requires Americans believing that they could be effective. And that is what I will do in this platform, is talk about these policy solutions, talk about positive ways forward to help people feel empowered about what America can accomplish. We've shown that we can make Americans angry. So now let's make Americans optimistic about what they can achieve in their own economic security. That is what I will do here. That is my third takeaway from the election. I hope you follow me and you can kind of come along on this journey as we talk through what the problems are in America and how we can solve them. It won't come out of the next administration, but that doesn't mean it won't come at all. We can build a better future. We can absolutely build a better future.
There's a haunting question that hangs over the American experiment, a question that Liberal pundits ask with a tone of condescending shock after every election, why? Why do millions of struggling working class Americans vote for a billionaire who lives in a gold tower? Why do they align with a man whose primary legislative achievement was a tax cut designed by and for his own class? Why do they excuse behavior in him that they would punish in their own children? And why do they seem to hate the teacher and the journalist more than the CEO who shipped their job overseas? The standard answers we're given are lazy. We're told they've been duped or that they're simply voting on hate. But if we really want to understand the reality of our country right now, we have to go deeper than that. We have to look at the neurology of shame, the sociology of waiting in line, and the absolute catastrophic failure of our political system to offer a stable home to the people it claims to represent. To understand the Trump voter, you first have to understand the pain of admitting you're trapped. Psychologists call this system justification theory. When a human being is stuck in a rigged system, it's psychologically devastating to admit that the game is fixed and you're losing. I talked a little bit about this in my Fear series. It creates a profound sense of helplessness. To cope, the human mind performs a trick. It rationalizes the status quo. It says, the system is fair, I'm just in a slump. Political psychologists like John Jost have shown that people often defend systems that disadvantage them because it protects their sense of order and meaning. John Steinbeck once famously observed that socialism never took root in America because the poor do not see themselves as an exploited class, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. That line, whether perfectly sourced or not, captures a cultural truth. Americans are taught to see themselves not as stuck, but as pre-success. This is where Trump enters the national psyche. He isn't seen by his base as the elite. He's seen as the avatar of their fantasy. He's the lottery ticket that hit. He's brash, he's golden, he answers to no one, and he walks and talks like a guy who got away with breaking every rule they resent. To the man working 2 shifts at an Amazon warehouse, attacking Trump's wealth feels like attacking his own imagined future. They're not voting to protect their current bank account. They're voting to protect the bank account they believe they are destined to have. He represents what sociologists call aspirational identification, the tendency to side with the figure you hope to become, not the one you are now. But a fantasy alone is not enough to drive a movement. You also need a villain, and the Democratic Party, particularly from the 1990s onward, volunteered for that role. Under the banner of the Third Way, Democrats made a calculated pivot. They moved away from being the party of the factory floor and became the party of the professional managerial class, lawyers, consultants, tech leaders, and highly educated professionals. They traded union dues for corporate PAC money. They championed free trade agreements, financial deregulation, and welfare cuts that many working class communities experienced as abandonment rather than modernization. In doing so, they fundamentally changed their language. To a worker in the Rust Belt, the Democratic Party stopped sounding like a union rep fighting for their wages and started sounding like an HR department policing their behavior. When you're struggling to buy eggs and the party of the left is lecturing you on structural equity while attending fundraisers with the same financial interest buying up your town, you don't feel represented, you feel managed. Political scientists describe this as the diploma divide, the split between voters with college degrees and those without, where education now predicts partisan loyalty more than income does. To the working class, the elite is no longer just the guy who signs the paycheck. The elite is the person who corrects their grammar, mocks their religion, and tells them which words make them a bad person. This is why the class war in America feels flipped upside down. It's no longer simply the poor versus the rich. It is the uncredentialed versus the credentialed, right? Sociological work on status resentment shows that cultural disrespect now hits as hard as a pay cut. Trump attacks the people his base feels judged by. When he mocks a journalist, a professor, a scientist, or a bureaucrat, he's not just being rude. He's effectively saying, these people think they're better than you. I'm showing you they're weak. It's emotional revenge in real time. This psychological dynamic helps explain why his supporters excuse behavior that liberals find appalling. To his base, the bad behavior is the proof of his authenticity. In a world of polished teleprompter reading politicians who speak in focus grouped platitudes, Trump's lack of filter signals that he's not owned. Right? Social psychologists sometimes call this performative authenticity, the idea that violating norms publicly is taken as evidence of being real and independent. When he says something shocking or cruel, it triggers a thought process in his supporters that says, Only someone who is truly free would dare to say that. His rudeness is interpreted as strength. His chaos is interpreted as disruption of a corrupt order. It also taps into the power of vicarious retribution. If you feel humiliated by the system, seeing your champion humiliate the system feels like justice. Every time he owns the libs or breaks a norm, it delivers a small dopamine hit of borrowed status to those who feel left behind. It's revenge by proxy, and that doesn't make the cruelty acceptable. It explains why the cruelty reads as cathartic to the people cheering. However, we can't ignore the hardest, most essential part of this conversation, the friction of social progress. Sociologist Arlie Hochschild describes the deep story of the American right as a feeling of standing in a line, waiting for the American dream, while the line barely moves. Your feet hurt, you're tired. Suddenly you see people cutting in line ahead of you, minorities, immigrants, women, queer people, people who were once kept at the back. And who's waving them through? The government, the media, the universities. When the working class hears discussions about reparations, DEI initiatives, or expanding protections for immigrants and marginalized groups, they often do not see justice, they see displacement. Political psychology research calls this status threat or racial status threat, when a dominant group experiences increased equality as a loss rather than a gain. When you're used to being at the center of the story, equality does not feel like fairness, it feels like a demotion. The growing pains of finally recognizing the rights and voices of people of color, immigrants, and queer communities can feel to some struggling white voters like an active attack on their own survival. Trump exploits this brilliantly. He validates the line cutter narrative. He tells them explicitly or implicitly, you're not failing because you aren't working hard. You're failing because they're taking what's yours. Then that story transfers the shame of poverty and precarity away from the self and onto a scapegoat. It's a powerful, addictive psychological relief, and it's incredibly dangerous. All of these factors culminate in a sociological state known as anomie, we talked about before, a sense of normlessness where the social contract feels broken and rules no longer make sense. Anomie creates a special kind of desperation that makes people more willing to take risks. If you're comfortable, you vote for stability. If you feel anomie, if you feel like the system is a burning building, you don't vote for the firefighter, you vote for the arsonist. You vote for the guy who promises to burn it all down, even if you might get burned in the process. The tragedy of this moment isn't only that a billionaire con man won working class loyalty, it's that millions of people were left so exposed that his cruelty could feel like protection instead of a warning siren. The modern left has poured enormous energy into defending the humanity of immigrants, queer and trans people, and communities of color, often against a movement that treats other people's pain as entertainment. It's not irrational for progressives to be done handing out infinite benefit of the doubt to those who cheer that on. There's a real and justified moral exhaustion on that side that keeps trying to hold the line against open dehumanization. But refusing to excuse is not the same as refusing to understand. And understanding how shame gets weaponized, how status anxiety becomes racial threat, how anomie makes people reach for the arsonist, that's not about giving anyone a pass. It's about denying authoritarians the raw materials they need. If we don't map the emotional machinery, we leave it running in the dark, and it will be used again and again. So the task is not to meet everyone in some warm, shared emotional middle. The task is colder and more disciplined. To see clearly how people are being played, to take their material and emotional injuries seriously without normalizing the cruelty done in their name, and to rebuild a politics where dignity is not something you have to steal from someone else to feel. As long as that machinery runs unchecked, as long as shame can be so easily redirected into rage at the vulnerable instead of accountability for the powerful, there will always be another arsonist ready to light the match.
So yeah, visibly there's this trend of white Americans admitting to some truths, and they're saying, we didn't think that these problems were going to affect us. We didn't think that it was going to go this far with this Trump administration, and maybe they didn't think that they were going to be included in all of the chaos that are happening right now in America, especially with ICE enforcement, with economic hardships. Many of these, political waves were once tied to movements around figures like, for example, Donald Trump and the broader nationalist surge that, it had promised strength, protection, good business, more jobs, like America first, you remember. But policies built on fear don't just isolate one group forever. eventually they expand, and even those that have been proponents of it are going to feel the consequences at some point. Now what we are seeing is farmers crying, farmers going out of business, small business owners are complaining about economic instability, and workers are losing jobs. Some are working 2 to 3 jobs, and still they can manage to just live a decent life. And communities that once felt protected are suddenly vulnerable. Those that told others that just trust the process, work harder, don't be lazy, are suddenly realizing that they can also work harder, and that there was no exaggeration. Even enforcement through agencies, through ICE, for example, which many believed would only target others, would only target illegal immigrants, would only target immigrants, and would eventually only target the police, target black people, is now being experienced broadly by the same people who thought they were safe from it. And people are shaken. And here is the contrast, though, that many black Americans want, many of them, none feel like this is a new concept. And many black communities have always spoken about police brutality, economic exclusion and economic hardships, political instability. It wasn't theory, it's been daily life for them. The difference now is the scale. Who is now getting affected? It's not only minorities, it's not only black people. It's now expanded to even those that were once like privileged, but once those communities that once absorbed all that problem quietly, the marginalized communities, they're now just watching as it spreads outwards. And that's why you see many black people saying they're taking a backseat in this moment. For example, many of them have been coming out to say this ICE problem is not their fight, that this ICE problem is nothing new to them. In fact, it's just the surface of it all. It's not that they don't care, but because, to be honest, police brutality and over policing of communities is nothing new for them to say. There is nothing else they can say. They have said it all before. When you, for example, been warning everybody about the structural problems of your country, of the country for decades, but nobody listens, and then the same problems begin to affect everyone, those that did not listen, you don't have to repeat yourself. What do? You just let the reality speak. And maybe that's why they're just saying, this is not our fight. This moment is exposing something rather, deep, and even white Americans who did not vote for and this is the point, even white Americans who did not vote for this administration, they are shocked by what is happening. And it's funny, it's interesting, it's also ironical that they are shocked. Even though they didn't vote, they are disturbed by the economic pressures, the political tension, and institutional instability, so on and so forth. But for a long time, many of them were shielded, even though maybe they were on the other side. It didn't matter whether you're right or left, conservative or liberal, as long as you were white, at least there was some level of protection. It looks like right now, that is now what is disappearing. At least there were always some safety nets, even if you're on whichever side. But so long as you're white, there was some institutional cushioning, and there was just like a benefit of doubt. Now those buffers with this administration, they're either weakening or disappearing. And when protection fades for people that are used to being protected, reality will feel so harsh to them. And this is what people meant when they said racism is expensive. Racism distorts policy. It prioritizes emotion over strategy. It weakens institutions, of course. It divides and affects talent pools. You can imagine how many black people never ever get or have never gotten what they deserve just because they were black, or that black people have to work twice or thrice as hard as white people just to get a job position just to get, you know, what they really deserve, you know. Basically, it creates instability and it eventually spreads to everyone. A system built on exclusion cannot remain stable forever. That's a fact. When governance is driven by, you know, resentment instead of long-term planning for the people, as you see, administrations disappear over time. Administrations are never permanent, you know. A certain administration will be in power for 2 terms or 1 term, and then they will disappear. The damage does not then stay confined. That's the problem. The damage will stay long term, and it multiplies. Now, what we are seeing is Trump cut ties, major ties with China, for example, and China decided, maybe with the case with you know, the exports that America was doing to China, and China decided now to look elsewhere, to Brazil for soybean and Argentina. You know, before that whole economic problem is reversed, maybe Trump would not be in power, or maybe would not even be on earth by that time. It has long-term consequences, and now many Americans are saying that this is not who we are, this is not America. But the deeper question is, was it really ever different? For many Black people and minorities, this is not a sudden collapse. It is just an unveiling. It is a revelation, an exposure, you know, exposing America for what it has always been to them that didn't know. And it's America revealing itself more clearly to people who were previously insulated from its harshest reality, from its, you know, harshest side of it. And it's not about revenge. It's not about celebrating the other people's struggles. It's about understanding the consequences, because you cannot build political movements around fear, around division, you know, and expect economic harmony. And you cannot normalize instability and think that there will be some stability, you know, selectively for certain people. You cannot weaken like democratic institutions. You don't care what the court says. You know, you override and overrule the constitution, and assume that it will only fail certain communities. You know, eventually everyone will end up feeling the consequences of those actions, and that's what we are witnessing now. It's not just political frustration. It is collapse of an assumption. The assumption that certain policies would only hurt certain people. You know, assumption that nationalism automatically guarantees prosperity, maybe to some people. You know, the assumption that dismantling guardrails for your people would somehow strengthen the system. You know, you cannot eat your cake and have it. It's said, but systems don't work like that. You know, when trust erodes, you know, markets, for example, the markets will respond. Right now, you see, the tourism sector in America has been seriously affected, you know, because of the polarized political climate. And even next year, when the World Cup is supposed to be held in the US, people have been saying they're canceling tickets. They fear going to America right now. You know, the market is now taking the hit. You know, when institutions they weaken, you know, instability begins to spread. When people cannot trust the constitution to protect them, cannot trust the courts to take care of them, you know, the instability really spreads. And when divisions also deepens, when you continuously are pitting people against each other, black versus white, immigrants versus natives, you know, national strength declines, because all these people, black and white, they are Americans. They make up for whatever. They are contributing in different ways. So when they are divided, the country's national is now going to take the hit, you know. So yes, many people are shocked, but many black people are simply saying, we try to tell you this, you did not listen. Racism is not just immoral, it's expensive. It's really expensive, and that's what we are really now seeing happening, you know. And when the bill comes due, it really asks, who did you vote for? you'll have to try and find means to settle it. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents about it. That's my take about it. I don't know what you think about it. Do share with me what you think, as usual, in the comment section below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.